What's going on, everybody? This is Abnormal Truth. Thanks for listening. I'm going to do a video today that I've been thinking about doing for a long time, and it's about the many commonalities between aliens and demons. And I've made a list here, and I've been holding on to it for a while, and so I'm finally getting around to it. This is by no means a complete list, but I took a lot of time and just made a good long list. There's maybe 23, 24 commonalities I have here. I think this is an important topic of, are aliens really demonic and not actually from space at all? And so I think this is important because this keeps coming up in the chat rooms on the YouTube channels I watch, and it just keeps coming up a lot. And besides that, we have a lot of reports and pre-programming on movies and such about aliens here lately. UFO sightings are on the rise. You actually see them on the news quite often compared to 20 years ago. There are a lot of alien movies out there, and it just seems like they're pushing the alien idea more than ever. They used to not even talk about it. Yes, there were sci fi movies since the 50s and 60s, but I believe this is a deception here, and I have looked into UFOs and aliens for decades. I'm 45. I got my first UFO book when I was 6, and I've just looked into it ever since. And I've been in abductee chat rooms for years, and I've talked to hundreds of abductees and contactees. I know all the lore. I know all the common things that happen when people are taken. I've been taken myself, so I've got a lot of background in this. Just so you know where I'm coming from, and on top of that, decades of study. So, I recently, within a few years ago, have come to the conclusion of what they actually are, and that's why I studied them, because I wanted to know exactly what they are. And anyway, I want to read this list and talk about each one. I'm going to make a video about how I know that aliens are demonic. But this is going to take such a while to read off and explain. I wanted to do a separate video first of the commonalities between aliens and the demonic, so that you get an idea that this is the same thing. They're the same entities, and that's a fact. And then I want to try to persuade everyone that they are demonic and not just aliens from outer space somewhere. So that's about all I'm going to get into before I start this list. Um, okay, so sleep paralysis. You have old hag syndrome. You have sleep paralysis, which happens in abductions. The old hag syndrome, if you don't know, is when an entity sits on your chest, and it's usually described as a old woman, almost like a witch-looking being. And sleep paralysis is really interesting. I have experienced several forms of sleep paralysis. When I was a child, I woke up a couple of times and I couldn't move, and the only thing I could move were my eyes, and that's all there was to it. My body didn't shut off that mechanism that keeps you from moving when you're sleeping, and there for a few minutes, if that, I couldn't move. So I believe that is actually sleep paralysis that can happen. Not really supernatural in origin. You just that mechanism in your brain that uh, makes it so where you don't thrash out when you're sleeping and having a dream. And then you have the other kind of sleep paralysis, and this one I have experienced often when before I was actually asleep. I was laying down, but I wouldn't be able to move, and then I fell asleep. This came though with an electrical. It felt like a low current of electricity, usually in the head, and that's kind of scarier. The thing is I have experienced that and have woken up with scoop marks on me. And so that's another form. I've had something called double sleep paralysis, where my girlfriend I was living with, we both had sleep paralysis at the same time, and I woke up and she was struggling to say my name, and she actually was able to wake me up while we both couldn't move. And at the same time, I was having a dream about an entity talking to me about um, kind of selling out. Like, if you give your soul to the dark forces, we'll give you a better life and do this and that for you. And it was like they were talking to my soul, and I rejected that. And then I was woken up by her trying to say my name because she could barely talk, but we both couldn't move at the same time. So we had sleep paralysis at the same time. And I just so happened to be having a quote unquote dream. So anyway, abduction does have a lot to do with sleep paralysis. I do not believe that abductions are just the stereotypical secular explanation of sleep paralysis. I believe they're separate things. Because I believe I've had, I don't know, medical sleep paralysis where nothing strange happened. I woke up in the morning, I couldn't move for a little bit. It's kind of scary. But anyway, so that's the sleep paralysis thing. I reject the idea that sleep paralysis is the root cause of abduction because I've had it happen several ways and I've had it in supernatural occurrences. So both of these things, aliens and the demonic, both of these things have been around for thousands of years. So again, here I'm trying to prove to you that aliens and demons, and when I say I'm gonna say demonic because I don't believe it's straight up demons that are doing this. Demons are disembodied spirits. I believe this would have to do with more of fallen angels. But so I'm just going to call it the demonic. But both of them have been around for thousands of years, and that just shows you that both of these sets of entities that are the same thing basically have been around. I don't know, maybe since the beginning, since there was a population. Anyway, that's one clue. The aliens have supposedly been here for thousands of years. Demons have been around, and that's just one other clue that you know these things have been with us. And again, I think they're the same things. If you have the interpretation of the Bible as I do, fallen angels, uh, they came down. Some of them came down and mated with women, and so that's one form of genetic manipulation. But there's also people who believe that the fallen angels did genetic experiments. And in this way, you can see that the Bible, the way Satan or the devil, whoever, however you want to call him, that's how he was fighting back against God, was that he was going to corrupt the human race, so much so that uh, Jesus couldn't be born, basically. And so in the days of Noah, it says God picked Noah basically because he was perfect in his generations. Not that he was, such a perfect man or anything. He was one of the last ones left that his DNA was still perfectly human. And so once you realize that, it explains a lot of things in the Bible, and it tells you basically what Satan's game plan is. That he was going to corrupt the human race so much that they couldn't go to heaven, and especially so the Messiah couldn't be born, in which he failed there. But that also is another reason why God made the flood. Uh, and on top of everybody being evil and corrupted and everything, they weren't exactly human, and that's what I believe. It fills in a lot of holes and spaces, and it explains a lot of things in the Bible. Even after the flood, uh, they were still here, the Nephilim, and that's why God had them go in and destroy whole cities and kill the women and the children. A lot of people use that as basis not to believe in the Bible because they say, well, that's an evil God. Well, the whole reason was because he was wiping out uh, that which he didn't intend to create. And so, if you haven't looked into that, to me, that's kind of maybe not the whole basis for the Bible, but that's a big part of the war. And I find it interesting that abductees, and I've talked to so many women who had a strange encounter, had sex with a reptilian, or they don't even remember any kind of sex going on, but they were operated on, they were on the table, they become pregnant, and a few months into the pregnancy, they get taken again, and the child disappears. So it's very evident that alien abduction is centered around reproduction. And so I hope that makes sense to you guys that fallen angels also have a lot to do with reproduction, corrupting God's creation, and alien abduction centers around reproduction a lot. Also, there's a very well known fact that a lot of contactees say that what's happening is they're trying to create their races. Their genetics are failing, and they're taking our DNA to make another race. That all ties in together. And so I'm gonna put it this way: their agenda matches, and it centers around reproduction. Both fallen angels or the demonic and aliens both center around reproduction, and that's a big one. That's another huge thing that ties these two things together. Um, Fairies, I believe, when you look at the very old accounts of fairies, it's changed over the years. Fairies were little people, and so are grays. I believe that the fairies were grays, and that's just what they called them back then. Also, fairies took, when I want to finish that thought, fairies and the grays, I believe, were the same thing, and over the years it changed. Um, but the fairies, when you read the ancient accounts, they were known to come in and steal women's babies from them. So that's another thing. So to me, fairies were just how we explained abductions a long time ago. Um, Both demons and aliens can be stopped by rebuking them in the name of Jesus. Uh, of course, demons, that happens. That should be a known thing. But I've personally rebuked aliens after I was born again. I was able to rebuke them and stop them from taking me or doing whatever they were going to do. And that's a very big point right there. Um, so, yeah, I need to explain this more. Or is it self evident? If you can rebuke aliens in the name of Jesus, why would aliens really care if you rebuke them? You see what I'm saying? If that has power over the aliens, then that proves what they are. And another thing, I just refuse to believe that we live in a world with aliens and also demonic beings. Just seems like a lot happening. Pretty much the supernatural, if you look at it through a biblical lens, it'll explain everything for you. I never had any truth before I was born again because I wasn't looking at it through a biblical lens. I don't. It seems like I would almost figure something out, like what the alien agenda was, but then I'd hear other credible things that just made me. I never knew the truth. I always came to some sort of dead end. I'd also like to mention that there's a group called um, alienresistance.org, and they're called CE4 Research Group. And this gentleman, I believe, was in MUFON, and he found over 200 cases of people being able to rebuke the aliens when they were getting taken and rebuke them in the name of Jesus. And it was able to stop the abduction. And he also noted that MUFON, which is a mutual UFO network or whatever, they were not making this fact known for several reasons. And I believe he has over 200 cases where that worked. Jesus' name worked in stopping the abduction, and they weren't making that known. And back in the many years I was studying this topic, I didn't really know that. I was always told that even Jesus' name wouldn't do anything. That was the common consensus between all the people I knew and the abductees and the contactees. So there is that. But CE4 Research Group, I believe their website is alienresistance.org. They give you a lot of information, and that's a very good group, basically proving that aliens are demonic. So, of course, both, and I'm moving on now to 6. Both cause fear, and so, as you can imagine, demonic presences can cause tremendous fear. Aliens coming to get you causes tremendous fear. They both put off fear, and it's kind of strange that aliens would put off that same kind of fear. So that's just another commonality in between these things that to me are the same. Um, Both have telepathic communication. Demons, I believe, can project thoughts into your mind. Of course, aliens are said many times to be able to look into your eyes and communicate with you. So there's another big one. Both of these entities can do that. They can communicate telepathically. And so that's another big clue that these are exactly the same entities. You just got to figure out which one you believe they are. Um, Invisibility. Of course, demons or the demonic can be invisible, and there's bunch of evidence that aliens can not be seen. So that one's pretty evident, but it's totally worth bringing up because both of those, uh, both aliens and the demonic, have this ability for sure. Uh, Interacting with humans at the soul level, there's so many people, abductees and contactees, that talked about how, like reptilians would talk about how they knew them throughout their generations, and a lot of I've even heard contactees tell me that the reptilians could look at their DNA and tell their whole like soul travel because they were promoting what's it called? I'll think of it in a second. They were promoting reincarnation, and that they knew them throughout all their reincarnations on this planet. So that's another thing. You may not hear that unless you have been deep and you've talked to a lot of abductees and contactees, that a lot of them say they've known your soul throughout all your incarnations. And so that's another one. That one may not be as evident, but that's another thing they do. Um, Also, this one's a big one, about aliens also being interdimensional. So if they're not of this dimension and they're not coming from other planets, this is the conclusion a lot of people have come to about aliens. And a lot of them are the big researchers. Carl Sagan, I believe, was one. A lot of your top uh, researchers of this, with degrees, have come to the conclusion that these things are interdimensional. Well, the demonic is also interdimensional because they're basically in the spirit realm. And so both of these things look like they're definitely from the same place. They're interdimensional. Demons and fallen angels can travel in the other dimension, and so do aliens, evidently. That's how they pop in and out of sight and so on. Both of them can go through walls. I'm sure uh, anything demonic can go through the walls, and aliens have been told time and time again that they came through the walls to come get them. So that's another thing, a big ability that both of these things have. Um, just okay. So you can call both aliens and demons too. You can summon demon, and then I've seen so many UFO groups out in fields, like Greer uh, does, and he'll tell this large group of people to like call the aliens. I've seen that happen. They try to call the aliens. They'll see a light in the sky. So both of these things can be summoned, basically. So that's another clue that these things are actually the same entities. Strange lights. Uh, you know, in the Bible, you have lights coming down and stuff like that, and then you have, of course, UFOs. I believe a lot of these UFOs people see, and especially like the morphing UFOs that you'll see. There's a lot of morphing UFO videos out there where it just looks weird. It keeps changing shape. I believe that the government probably has a lot of things that look like UFOs, but there's also, I believe that aliens can, I'm sorry, I believe that angels can travel in ships. I don't know if they actually have ships or they turn into a ship. I believe that angels can look like anything they want, basically. They could definitely look human, which ties into the whole Nordics and all that. I believe all those Nordic encounters were probably fallen angels, and some of them could have been God's angels too, talking to people. But they're tall, beautiful looking, usually blonde hair. Some of them could have black hair. Kind of perfect looking human beings with there were something a little different about them. To me, those were all some form of angel. So that's very important to know. But I just want to say that I think a lot of those UFOs, some of them, are definitely angels. And I've seen videos of UFOs fighting in the sky. Looks like they're shooting lasers at each other. I believe there's a war in heaven. That's what's going on there, but it's angelic. Um, let's see. Lives become worse after contact. You have lots of strange things happen after you're abducted. Some PTSD. You have strange things happen in your life, and I've heard this a lot from contactees and abductees. And some of them even told me that the quote unquote aliens were messing with their lives and making bad stuff happen, and this and that. And of course, if you come in contact with straight up demonic entities, your life, if they're messing with you, it can disrupt your life. Um, and if you're taken, it can take many years of your life trying to figure out what happened to you, and you think about it a lot. So it's generally not a good thing for your life to come in contact with these things. They're both worldwide phenomena. Pretty much all cultures have stories of, some kind of demonic entities. And then, of course, a lot of cultures, the Native American Indians, for instance, they talk about the sky people and this and that. So it's a worldwide phenomena, and that's always a good indicator of something's actually happening, and there's something to this because it's not just one culture that experiences this; it's pretty much all of them. So that's important. Both of them are anti-God, which is another huge clue. Basically, of course, the demonic's anti-God, but in the abductee, contactee culture or groups or communities, um, it really does make you fall away from God. It does not promote being a Christian. It's the opposite. Um, the aliens, of course, a lot of them, most of them, people will tell you that they, say there isn't a God, and then you got wrapped up into that whole, I don't know. That should be kind of self-evident. Both of them are not of God. Of course, the demonic entities are not of God, but also I just want to say that I was probably never further away from God than when I was really wrapped up into this, and I was talking to people all the time about it, and I was being taken, and it just leads you away from God in so many ways. I can't think of them all right now, but that's another big clue. They're both anti-God, and they do not promote uh, Christianity at all. Um, Both of them can shapeshift. I'm sure fallen angels they can change shapeshift into anything, and they can also be invisible. They just have that ability. They can even look like a human that you wouldn't even know they weren't a human. It says in the Bible you may have entertained angels unaware. And as far as the aliens go, shape shifting has occurred there, and they can be invisible. Anyway, that's just one thing. You have to look a little further into the alien thing to catch the shape shift. But UFOs can shapeshift. I guess it would be the best example. And those morphing UFOs I was talking about, that's kind of like they couldn't keep their form, and so they were kind of shape shifting. Or it can be a huge UFO that people are seeing, like in the Phoenix Lights, and then they can basically come down into the size of a basketball, like an orb, where they can change from an orb into like a disc. So there's definitely shape shifting abilities on the alien side too. Family lineage affected. So family lineage affected. That's another commonality. If you know anything about abductees and contactees, they seem to go through whole family lines. A lot of people that are abducted, they'll find out that their grandmother was abducted, and it goes back no telling how far. And also, you do have demons that have followed your family and they know a lot about you. That's why they can act like deceased family members because they actually were in the minds of their ancestors and they've been around for thousands of years, of course. So uh family lineage is another thing. That's another thing they have in common. And isn't this a rather long list, guys? I've been talking for 30 minutes now, and there's just so many similarities when you're trying to figure out if aliens are really demonic. These are the same things. These are the exact same beings that we're talking about. It's whether you think they're aliens or whether you believe the Bible. And that's one thing I always found strange was that the aliens just had this supernatural uh, tone to them, but you pass it off as that's their technology because magic is really similar to technology, there's just a big link there. And so most people, if they're getting taken or they believe in aliens and stuff, they, go and there's a big similarity there. That's just a lot to it. Um, Both of them lie. Of course, demonic entities lie a lot, and so do the aliens. You can't get a straight story where the aliens are from. They've told lots of people different star systems and stuff they're from. There's just a lot of lies in the alien abduction scenario there. They lie constantly, and that's why you kind of can't really figure anything out. If they tell you anything at all, it's usually a lie. Um, Reptilians are something that will give you a big clue there. The seraphim angels had a serpent look to them, and also you have the fact that a lot of abductees are taken by reptilians, the reptilians, and that's a big clue. Reptilians have a lot to do with it. In the a lot of the contactees I've talked to because they have more information or more lies that the aliens have told them. The reptilians are just nasty usually. Also, I've actually read of a lot of accounts, but I've actually talked and known to a lot of women that have had sexual encounters with reptilians. And there you go. You have it back to the fallen angels mating with earth women or human women, and so that is a big tie-in. The reptilians are also known to kind of oversee everything. They're like over the grays. They're kind of like the boss of the grays, and so what you have there, it may be that the reptilians are actually the fallen angels, some of them, because not all angels have this appearance, but it may very well be that the reptilians, which are seraphim angels, as far as I can tell, they may have created the Greys, and that's why so many contactees say that it's like the reptilians were their bosses, basically. So you have that, and UFOs are in the Bible. That's the one I'm going to end on. In Ezekiel, a fiery amber colored wheel came down, and it pretty much describes this weird UFO. And there's UFOs in the Bible, and that'll tell you something right there that the angels have this technology that they fly around in, and that goes back to the chariots of the gods, and that's just a if that should be common sense if you know anything about the topic that since the UFOs are in the Bible, it doesn't mean that those were aliens coming down. It means that the fallen angels have this ability to fly around in ships like that. And I guess I'm going to end it here. I just wanted to really make a video about some. This wasn't an exhaustive list, but I wanted to make a video about some of the main commonalities in between aliens and the demonic. And I believe that um, this should open your eyes that we are talking about the same thing. You have to make the decision of whether these things are from other planets or they actually demonic. And I can just tell you, in my experience, these things are definitely demonic. And I was fooled and deceived for many decades that they were aliens. And so this is something very important that I think keeps coming up a lot in chat rooms lately. And so I really wanted to get this out and maybe make those connections for some people who needed it. I was um, really thinking about this for many years. You know, are those really aliens from different planets or are they demonic? And I hope I've given you enough commonalities to at least get you to see that these are the same entities. What are the chances that here on this plane that we have these things happening, and they all can be explained by looking at it through a biblical lens instead of looking at it through what the secular world is trying to push. And so I'd like to know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know. And I hope you guys can see that we're talking about the same things here, the very same entities. And so, anyway, I appreciate you guys. And I'll be coming out with another video about aliens or demons as soon as I can. I just wanted to get this list over with so that I could refer people back to this video when I start talking about aliens or demonic. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.